When the Bradley family stepped onto the Rhapsody of the Seas in March 1998, they were just hoping for sunshine, rest, and family time. The cruise, a Royal Caribbean voyage across the glittering Caribbean, was meant to celebrate Amy Bradley's recent college graduation and a new job waiting for her at home. Amy was no ordinary 23-year-old. She was a strong swimmer, a former lifeguard, and an independent thinker. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't impulsive. That's what makes her disappearance so chilling. The family's trip began like any other. Photos on deck, tropical drinks, music under the stars. But on the second night, Amy went to a shipboard party with her brother Brad. They danced to live reggae music with other guests and the cruise band, Blue Orchid. Surveillance footage later captured Amy dancing with the band's bassist, known only as Yellow. It would be the last time anyone captured Amy Bradley alive on camera. Amy and Brad returned to their cabin around 1:00 a.m. At 5:30 a.m., their father Ron woke briefly and saw Amy asleep on the balcony lounge chair. But when he woke again, just 30 minutes later, Amy was gone. No sound, no splash, no sign of where she'd gone. The ocean was still, the ship was still moving, and Amy Bradley had vanished. The ship's crew responded slowly. When the family begged the captain to keep passengers from leaving once the ship docked in Curaçao, the request was denied. Instead, hundreds of people poured off the ship, many of whom had never been questioned. The Bradleys were desperate, begging for help as their daughter possibly slipped into an island they didn't know, or worse, into the hands of someone who planned this. But the most terrifying part? Her shoes, lighter and cigarettes, all the things she would have taken, were still in the cabin. That one small detail unraveled the idea that she left willingly. Whatever happened to Amy, that morning, it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random. This wasn't just a case of someone falling overboard. This was something else, something that doesn't belong on cruise brochures. A young woman vanishing from a floating city, without a trace, without a sound, and without a single answer. After Amy Bradley vanished, what followed wasn't a rescue operation. It was silence, confusion, and delay. Her family expected urgency, alarms, and lockdowns. Instead, the cruise ship moved forward as if nothing had happened. The crew hesitated. The captain wouldn't stop passengers from disembarking in Curaçao. People walked off the ship that morning freely. Many never questioned. If someone had taken Amy, they could have been among those first off the ship, and no one would have noticed. But something even more chilling came to light. Amy had told her family earlier in the trip that the ship's crew was making her feel uneasy. She didn't like how some of them stared at her. She didn't want to be alone. She even mentioned a particular band member, Yellow, who seemed too interested in her. Was Amy sensing something no one else could? Was someone watching her, planning something? Then came the photograph. In the cruise's public photo gallery, a place where vacationers could view and buy pictures taken by the ship's photographers, Amy's parents noticed a photo of her that they hadn't taken. She wasn't with them in it. It looked like someone had snapped her from a distance. When they went back later to get it, it was gone, removed, erased. Who took the photo? Why was it placed publicly, only to disappear when they showed interest? It suggests one terrifying possibility. Amy wasn't just a victim of chance. She may have been targeted. Royal Caribbean's response was cold, even suspicious. A full ship search didn't happen until hours later. No one knew who left with what. The cruise line offered vague apologies, but refused to take any responsibility. The FBI eventually got involved, but by then, the trail was already fading. And yet for Amy's family, one thing was clear. She hadn't just wandered off. She hadn't fallen. She was being watched, possibly stalked, maybe even followed. It wasn't just a cruise, it was a trap. Amy Lynn Bradley disappeared without a sound. But the deeper her story was pulled into the light, the more shadows began to form around it. shadows of negligence, silence, and something else, something darker. In the months after Amy Bradley vanished, her name should have faded into the endless list of people lost at sea. But instead, something strange happened. People kept seeing her. Not once, not twice, but over and over again, in places where she shouldn't have been, and always under disturbing circumstances. The first sighting came in 1999, just a year after her disappearance. A Canadian man vacationing in Curaçao claimed he saw a woman on a beach, walking between two men. She looked frightened, as if she was trying to get his attention, but couldn't speak freely. He didn't know who she was until he returned home and saw Amy's story on the news. He was sure it was her. But the most unsettling report came from a U.S. Navy officer. He claimed he visited a brothel in Curaçao while on shore leave and was approached by a woman who told him her name was Amy Bradley. She begged him for help, but by the time he figured out who she might have been, he was already back in the United States. This sighting came a year after Amy vanished, and it sent shockwaves through investigators. Could Amy still be alive? Trapped? Even more disturbing was a photo that surfaced in 2005 on an adult website. A private investigator working with the Bradley family stumbled upon it. The woman in the image resembled Amy in almost every way. Same jawline, same eyes, even the same unique tattoos. The woman looked vacant, uncomfortable. It didn't look staged. It looked like a cry for help. Amy's family was devastated. These weren't just theories anymore. They believed she was being held against her will. The idea that she had been abducted from the ship, possibly trafficked into a criminal network, suddenly became more than speculation. It felt real. And yet, no lead ever lasted. Every time someone claimed to see Amy, the trail vanished just as quickly. It was like chasing smoke. Whether it was fear, silence, sea, or power, something was keeping Amy just out of reach. This was no longer a missing person case. It was a ghost story playing out in real life. A young woman had been pulled out of the world, and no one knew how to bring her back. Cruise ships sell the dream of escape, floating resorts where reality stays behind. But behind the all-you-can-eat buffets and live music lies a dangerous truth. Cruise ships operate in a legal gray zone. And that's exactly where Amy Bradley disappeared. When someone vanishes on land, the jurisdiction is clear. Local police, emergency services, and national agencies step in immediately. But at sea, things get murky. The Rhapsody of the Seas was registered in Liberia, despite being operated by a US-based company. That's a common cruise industry practice called flagging out, registering ships under foreign flags to avoid strict regulations. It's cheaper, it's easier, but it also makes it harder to enforce laws when something goes wrong. So when Amy went missing, the Bradley family faced a nightmare. No single authority was responsible. The FBI got involved, but they had no power until the ship docked. The ship's own security had failed to act quickly, and by the time Curaçao police were alerted, crucial hours had already been lost. There were cameras on the ship, but footage was limited. Logs were incomplete. The ship didn't even keep a record of which crew members were near Amy's cabin that morning. In theory, modern cruise liners should be among the safest places on Earth, surrounded by people, cameras, and staff. But Amy's disappearance exposed a chilling flaw. Cruise ships are floating cities with no real government, no accountability, no obligation to protect passengers once they're offshore. Even worse, the cruise line, Royal Caribbean, was criticized for its lack of transparency. They refused to release internal records. They denied requests to interview key staff. They insisted Amy must have fallen overboard, despite zero evidence of that. To the Bradley family, it felt like the ship itself was working to forget Amy. Before anyone else could find her, the question is, why? Was it to avoid liability? To prevent bad press? Or was there something darker being hidden beneath layers of vague jurisdiction and corporate silence? Amy didn't disappear in a jungle or a remote mountain pass. She disappeared from a cruise ship deck, surrounded by people, with nowhere to go. And still, no one saw anything. No one heard anything. And no one has ever explained how that's even possible. As the years passed and Amy Bradley remained missing, the silence surrounding her case began to fill, not with answers, but with noise. Psychics, internet sleuths, opportunists, and even scammers began to circle around her story. Some genuinely wanted to help. Others just wanted to be part of a headline. In 1999, not long after the disappearance, the Bradley family received a call from a man claiming to have information. He said he could rescue Amy if they paid. Desperate for any lead, the family listened. But the tip turned out to be a hoax. The man was arrested and later admitted he made it all up to extort money. It wasn't just a setback. It was cruel. It played on their grief and gave false hope in a case where hope was already hanging by threads. Then came the psychics. Television shows and tabloid media brought in self-proclaimed mediums claiming to see Amy alive, in hidden locations or dark rooms. Some said she was being held by traffickers, others that she had died shortly after her disappearance. Each vision conflicted with the next. None led to anything real. For the family, every psychic episode became another twist of the knife. Promises without evidence. Visions without closure. Social media and online forums added another layer. Amateur detectives picked apart photos, compared tattoos, traced cruise ship layouts, even tried to contact former crew members. The theories exploded. Was Amy drugged? Was the crew involved? Was she taken ashore in disguise? Each theory led to hundreds of comments, but rarely any proof. Over time, the case became more than a mystery. It became a myth. The facts blurred with fiction. Leads became legends. One of the strangest chapters came in 2005 with the adult website photo. Many believed it was Amy, but the image couldn't be authenticated. Was it her? A lookalike? Or something darker? Someone paraded in front of a camera to see and a message? The longer the mystery lasted, the more people tried to own it. But for her family, it was never a story. It was real. Their daughter, their sister, was missing. And every fake lead, every false hope, made the real tragedy harder to reach. Amy didn't need visions. She needed evidence. She didn't need myths. She needed justice. After Amy Bradley vanished, her family didn't fade into the background. They didn't quietly grieve. They became warriors. They appeared on television shows, met with government officials, hired private investigators, and traveled internationally following every whisper that sounded like a lead. Their mission was clear. Bring Amy home, or at least find out what really happened. But in their search, they uncovered something even more horrifying. How little protection existed for people on cruise ships. Despite the thousands of passengers who board cruise ships every day, there was no centralized system to investigate disappearances at sea. The FBI could only act when a crime involved a U.S. citizen. Cruise companies weren't required to report missing persons immediately. And even when someone did vanish, cruise lines often handled it like a PR issue, not a criminal emergency. In Amy's case, the ship's delay in acting likely erased crucial evidence. Her possible abductors could have left the ship in the early morning. No security footage was reviewed in time. No deck logs were checked immediately. And the disembarkation was not stopped. These weren't just oversights. They were failures of a system that simply wasn't built for emergencies like this. The Bradley family began pushing for change. They spoke in front of Congress. They worked with advocacy groups. Eventually, their voice helped bring attention to a problem no one wanted to admit existed. But change was slow. Even after Amy's disappearance, cruise ship safety remained a loosely regulated industry. To this day, more than 200 people have mysteriously vanished from cruise ships since the late 1990s. Some fall, some jump, but others, like Amy, just vanish. No blood, no body, just absence. Amy's story became a cautionary tale, a tragic example of how vacation can turn into a nightmare, and how even a floating city can promise safety. Her case is now studied by maritime security experts, taught in law classes, and referenced in documentaries. But despite all that attention, the central mystery remains unsolved. The most haunting part isn't just that Amy disappeared. It's that the world allowed it to happen, and then moved on. She became a face on a missing poster, a cold case, a headline. But for her family, she's still real, still out there, still waiting. Over the years, investigators and independent sleuths have circled around a handful of chilling theories. Some are grounded in cold facts, others are filled with fear and speculation. But they all revolve around the same question: what really happened to Amy Bradley on that cruise ship morning? The most widely accepted theory, especially among private investigators, is that Amy was the target of a human trafficking operation. She was young, attractive, alone on the balcony, and had already reported feeling uncomfortable with how some crew members were treating her. Some believe a small group aboard the ship may have been involved in scouting or selecting passengers for trafficking networks operating in Caribbean ports. The ship's stop in Curaçao fits this theory disturbingly well. Curaçao has been cited in numerous international reports as a hub for human trafficking. And the early sightings of Amy on the island, including one where a cab driver said a woman fitting her description tried to speak to him before being pulled away, only fuel this possibility. Could she have been taken off the ship in disguise or led off by someone she reluctantly trusted? Then there's the theory of an internal cover-up. Some investigators point to Royal Caribbean's strange behavior. The missing photo of Amy from the cruise's gallery, the delayed search, and the refusal to lock down the ship all suggest one thing: they didn't want a scandal. The cruise line may not have been involved directly, but they may have chosen to protect their reputation rather than find the truth. A less accepted theory is the accidental fall, that she leaned too far over the railing and fell silently into the ocean. But her sandals, lighter, and cigarettes, items she never left behind, were still in her room. And Amy was a trained swimmer. She wouldn't have gone near the edge carelessly. Her family has always rejected this explanation as not just unlikely, but impossible. And then there's the darkest theory of all, that Amy is still alive, that she's somewhere, still being held, her identity erased. There have been multiple sightings, photos, whispers. Each one fades before it can be proven. But taken together, they suggest a terrifying possibility. Amy Bradley didn't just disappear. She may have been erased. On purpose. Amy Bradley's story isn't the only one. Since the late 1990s, hundreds of people have vanished while aboard cruise ships. Men, women, even children, gone without a trace, often in international waters. These stories rarely make headlines. Most vanish quietly, and almost none are solved. The ocean is vast. But the bigger problem? So is the legal void around it. When a person disappears on land, there are rules. There are timelines, local jurisdictions, and agencies that jump into action. But on a cruise ship, the rules become blurry. It depends on the ship's flag, the location of the ship at the time, the nationality of the victim, and whether the cruise company even decides to report it. Amy disappeared on a ship registered in Liberia, run by a U.S. company, while sailing through international waters near Curaçao. That means 3 different legal systems, none of which had immediate authority. The result? Delays, miscommunication, no one taking responsibility fast enough to matter. Even when authorities did step in, they were always one step too late. Witnesses were gone. Video footage was lost or never reviewed. Leads were cold. Amy's case shows how cruise ships are legally isolated bubbles, with few rules and even fewer consequences. The illusion of safety hides a reality where things, people, can simply go missing. To make it worse, cruise companies have little incentive to publicize these incidents. They fear bad publicity, lawsuits, and loss of profits. So they minimize, they delay, they deny. In Amy's case, Royal Caribbean refused to provide full internal reports and stonewalled the family's questions. Their response wasn't criminal, but it was deeply negligent. Over time, organizations like the International Cruise Victims Association emerged, formed by families like the Bradleys who had been left without answers. They pushed for laws to require ships to report crimes immediately, retain surveillance, and preserve evidence. Some progress was made. But still, today, many passengers don't know the risks. Amy Bradley's story is a warning, not just of what can happen, but how easily it can happen without justice. When someone disappears on land, they leave behind footprints. But when they vanish at sea, they leave behind nothing but questions, and families forced to search waves for answers. Years have passed, investigations have ended, tips have faded, but the Bradley family never gave up. To them, Amy is not a cold case. She's not a face on a missing poster or a story used to scare future travelers. She's their daughter, their sister, and wherever she is, they believe, deep down, that she's still alive. From day one, the Bradleys refused to accept silence. They fought the cruise line, challenged investigators, and took their case to every major news outlet they could reach. Their story aired on shows like Unsolved Mysteries and Dr. Phil, bringing global attention to Amy's disappearance. They kept her photo in the public eye, hoping someone, somewhere, would remember something or finally speak. They hired private investigators, including those specializing in human trafficking. They sifted through false leads and heartbreaking hoaxes. They followed tips to the Caribbean, to remote islands, to dark corners of the internet. Every time the phone rang, they prepared themselves for hope or for heartbreak. The pain of not knowing is something they've described as worse than death. With death, there is grieving. With missing, there is only the endless loop of what-ifs. For Amy's mother, Iva, and father, Ron, the fight became their life's mission. And for her brother, Brad, the memory of that night, of sitting beside her on the balcony hours before she vanished, is something that never leaves. What sets Amy's story apart is not just the mystery, it's the legacy. Her case forced the world to look closer at how cruise ships operate, how disappearances are handled, and how easily lives can slip through bureaucratic cracks. Laws were proposed, safety protocols were discussed, but for the Bradleys, none of that matters unless it brings their daughter home. To this day, there is a $250,000 reward offered for credible information that leads to Amy's recovery. Her case on Oz is still listed on FBI databases. Her story still circulates on missing persons boards, in podcasts, in forums. And every year, the Bradleys hold on to the same belief. Amy is out there, somewhere. And maybe that's the most powerful part of this mystery. It isn't just a disappearance. It's a promise between a family and the daughter they won't stop searching for, until she is no longer just a ghost lost at sea.